Refactoring APIs. In this video, we're just going to update our APIs to handle some data validation, common errors, and to send status codes to the client. So let's go and update our code. All right, so back in the studio here, I'm going to go back to the back end under the API, open that, and most of our API or the code we're going to update are in this main.controllers file. So open that file and let's update our code. Now, the first thing that we want to do is, I guess, every time you do an update, a delete, or a read, we want to make sure the data actually is there, right? If it doesn't exist, then there's no point of doing anything, going anything further. So I'm going to go up above here, and I put a comment here just to say util functions. Okay, so the first thing I want to do here is to check for data exists, if data exists or not, right? So I'm going to do a function, and this function will call it is empty list, and I guess I'm going to take the object in here just to make sure it actually works in every case. And for this example here, oops, not a promise. What I mean is that I can access this providers, directly, so I can omit this completely, but I'm going to use it so that if I move this function elsewhere, I can still use this object to access the data that's passed to it. So what we do here is basically we check to see if this provider has data. If it doesn't, then we'll just return false. Otherwise, we'll return true, right? So I'll put here check if list is empty or not empty, however you want to call it. So I'm going to basically return I'm going to check if the object is set, because remember, JavaScript is case insensitive. I mean, it's a loosely typed language, so it can store any type of data. If it's null, right? If it's not null or not false, or if the list is not empty, that means the length is equal to 0. If it is, that'll return true, right? And also want to check to see if the list object is empty. Now, object, I can't just put length. This is only for array. To check object, there are a couple of ways, but I get the easier way is to check the keys. If the keys are empty, then it's blank, right? So I could do something like the object dot keys, the keys of the object, which is passed to it. If the length is equal to 0, then that is an empty list. And I'm going to close this out over here. Okay, so that is all we need to do. It's very simple, and it will just check to see if the list is empty. Okay, so that means we can go and modify our code, like in the create, for example. Well, let's see. Let's like in the create here, notice again when we add a new ID here. Now we can refactor and take this out into its own function, and we'll use that to maybe generate a new unique ID, right? So let's take that out first. I'm going to go put up here another function to I guess generate a unique ID. You may not want to use this, but I'll put it here anyway. And so function to get unique, I guess, ID, and we'll pass in the providers. Again, you want to make sure it works in every case. I could just basically get this directly from up here, which is fine, but I'll just put it here for now anyway. And so basically I'm going to copy this and put it right in here. And so when I do that, I don't need this anymore. I can basically take that out, and in its place, I'm going to put another a code in there. Well, the code will be to get the unique ID, right? If the ID is not created, we can then do something about it. But for now, I will come back. So the function to do that is we got everything here already. We get the ID, and then we go ahead and return that ID. But what if the ID is already exists in the database, or in this case in our list? So that means we have to check it again to make sure it's not there. If it's not there, then we can return it. Otherwise, if it is there, we keep generating until we get the random ID, right? And our minimum maximum is from, this number 100,000 to 998,000. Of course, there's not that many, but if you want to go bigger, you can just make that larger. But for now, it should be sufficient for us to use. So what I want to do is that when I get the ID, I want to check this ID against the list inside our providers list to see if it's in there. If it is, then it's duplicated. Then we're going to do another random ID again, right? So in the end down here is I'm going to return the ID back. Okay, but for this part, I want to do a loop in here. So I'm going to do, it is a perfect example for a do loop here. A do, and then I'm here would do the while what? Okay, so while the ID exists inside that, list. So that means I'll write another function to check for the existing ID. So I'm going up here and we'll write a function here again to check for existing provider. So the function, I'll call it exists provider, and I'm going to pass in the ID to it and check this ID against the providers list. Again, you can pass the providers list here. In this example here, I'm going to use it directly in the global providers. Okay, so what we do here is, well, we're going to check to see the providers dot find. We're going to find it in this provider. I'll call it provider as well. We can call it anything we want, just ABC, it doesn't matter. Just a variable name to store each element in that provider's list, right? Each object. We're going to check the provider's ID against the ID that we passed to it. So this ID here is this one we passed to it, and then this is inside the list, each provider. We check the ID against that. If it's there, then that means it exists, right? If it doesn't, then it'll return false. So we're going to return the whole thing, and that's it. We'll check to see if this provider, the return is either empty or not empty or false, right? And so that means down here in my do loop, I'm going to generate the ID like I did here. And instead of let, I'm going to change it to a var, because let will limit the scope to only the do loop here. So it doesn't exist when I return down here. It will always be false. So that means either you put this outside here, or you just change this to var. And I just do var. It's easier. And once we get the ID, then we want to check if the ID exists. So we can say exists provider the ID. Okay, so we generate the ID. If we check it, if it's unique, then we're done. Return that ID. If it's not, then keep doing it. That's what we're trying to do here. Okay, so that part is done. So now we got exists and so on. So with that done, we can now go ahead and update our code down here. So when we create a new provider, we want to check if the list is empty. So like empty. If it's empty, then we can just basically add it to it. There's nothing to check, right? If it's not empty, then we have to concern about the ID that's been passed to it. Is it, again, it depends if you want to allow the ID to be modified or not. If you don't allow a modification of the ID, then you don't have to worry about it. But let's just say that we do. Okay, so first I'm going to check if it's empty. So if it's empty list of the providers, if that is true, okay, again, I put it here. You can take it out if you want. If you take it out, then it will grab the providers directly from up here. But I'll just put it here anyway. If it's empty, if that is the case, then that means the list is empty. It comes back as true. Empty. Yeah, we don't have to worry about it. If it's well, we want to make sure that the list is completely empty, I guess. So I'm going to reset my providers to an empty list. I want to make sure it really is empty. I'm overriding my global variable. Okay. If it's not empty, then we want to get the ID from the body. If I'm doing, for example, if we go back to Postman, let's just say if I'm want to add this data to the post, right? I'm including the ID in the field here. So usually And if ID, let's just say it exists like that in the URL, I'm updating the ID for this provider, and inside the body of this document, I'm modifying the new ID to something like this, right? If that's the case, then I need to check the ID inside the body against the ID here. If they are the same, then no worries, it's the same. If it's different, then that means I'm changing its current ID to something else, and then I need to validate to make sure this ID doesn't exist in that list of IDs already, right? That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so that means I need to get the ID from the request body ID. That's coming from the request. I get that ID, and I need to check if that ID is exist in the code already. So again, if I do if exists provider using this ID from the list, if that does exist, then I want to resend. Either you can generate a new ID, so you can say ID is equal to get unique ID, and in this case, I will get new ID. No matter what, I don't need to check if it exists or not, right? And then once I get that, then I can go ahead and continue on. And so I'm going to say provider is equal to the body. That means everything that comes through, let's just get the new provider. Whatever is passed to this request is going to be assigned to this provider object. And then all I have to do is just to guarantee it, make sure it works, right? Although you don't have to, but guarantee it, just make sure, because the request ID here, if it's the same, then it's the same, because we might have changed it, right? If it's duplicate, we might change it, so we don't know where it is. So that means once we get everything from the body, we want to update the ID to the new ID here, just to guarantee it, okay? And then once that's done, then we're going to add this to the list. So that's all I have to do here. All this part here can be shortened to, because everything that comes in, like if you see in Postman, it's already filled in. Now, of course, if you want to be more secure, you will have to check for every field, right? Make sure it's not empty. If it's empty, ignore it using the current one, and so on. So you have to validate this data in certain ways. But for this scenario, let's just say everything's going to be filled in. And all I'm doing is update my ID, and then finally, I'm going to do a push to the providers list, and I'm pretty much done. So pushing the new provider to that list, and that's it. So all this part here can be commented out. So I'm going to go and comment everything here out. Control \. Okay, so these are commented out. I push it to the list, which I did already down here. Actually, I shouldn't have to do that, but yeah, let's take it out because I don't need to do that here. I got my new ID, and let me just collapse this. I can't. And I push it to the providers list, and it's in a status 200 successful, and I'm done. Okay, this is again if you want to generate a unique ID. Okay, if you want to send a response back and you want to force the sender to change it, then in here you want to say res status. I put it 400 or something, right? And you can say request response send something like duplicate ID not allowed, and then they will get a response. And if that's the case, then we're not going to issue the new ID here. We're going to have them do it and then resend it back until the ID is unique. Okay, so for now I'll just leave this as is, and it's not going to run this code here, for example, because it's gonna stop here. But anyway, so we can see that it's actually working, and I'll just save that for now. So this is for the create. All right, and so let's go and test this create here. Well, I'm gonna run it first. So go to the terminal, go to the back end, and node mon. I have an error here. Let's see. I have an error somewhere in my code. Let's see what that is. I'm not sure why, but let's see. Let's save that and see one more time. It's not finding our module, and I wonder what that is. Let's see. If we close that, check our module and providers. Why do we call it providers module? Did we change it? Did I change it? I thought I did not change it. Yeah. Okay. Well, not sure what happened there. Let's go back to the routes here again. It should be just main module, but I think I must have moved it or something. It's no longer here. Okay, I did something bad here. All right, let's see if I can restore it from somewhere else. Okay, I'm not sure what happened. I think I must have deleted it. So I basically put the copy back inside the route. My router somehow was gone, so it's back in. It should be the same as before. I made the change earlier in the previous video. I must have did something to it, but the thing we did was to add the ID to the put route. So let's close that and let's try again. Go back to the terminal, and as you can see, it's running already. So we're good. Again, if it doesn't work, just make sure that you have the routes back in there. Okay, so now let's go and test our post to make sure it works. Okay, if we have a duplicate ID, it should not be allowed because it's going to check the ID in the body. If the body, as you can see here, we did not check one thing also. We want to make sure that if the ID is from the request ID from the body, then we should not do anything about it. If it's different, then we want to check to make sure it's not part of the list. So let's go and run the test. So here in the post, well, I'm going to make sure that this ID exists first. So let's get that first. Okay, so as you can see, it does exist in the list. Now, if I put the same ID back in here, get the same person, I change to Mary instead of Mary Linda. And if I put a post, okay, and see what happens. All right, so we got a message here. Somehow, what is the message saying? If I preview, it says something like not found. So that means this ID is not found. The reason why it's not found is probably, let's try again. Maybe it's something else. Let's check our code again. Why is it not found? Well, maybe that means that the link is not found. So let's go check the routes again. When I do a post, okay, a post, yeah, I don't put any ID here, right? I'm adding a new one. Yeah, it's my mistake. So let's go back to Postman again, and we should not include ID here. This is the wrong API. So just like that, I'm adding a new ID from the body. It matches the already exists. So let's go and send a post. And you can see that it says ID is duplicated. It's not allowed. What we did was we checked the body of that data, and we compare this ID in the list. If it exists, then we did not allow it. And that's something that we need to make sure, right? So you don't duplicate the ID, which is working as expected. If I change this to something like a 3.3, then it should be fine because it doesn't match. If I do it again, and you can see that we added that to the list, and it's in there now. Now, if I go and add it again, it should not be allowed because it's already existed in the list. So we got the same message. If you want to see if it really exists, you go back to the URI here and change the post to a get. And if it is correct, it should pull that data back to us for us to see down here. Okay, so that's working correctly as expected. So now let's turn this off. And so let's go and modify the other ones. So we got the post to working correctly. Now let's go and do the next one, which is the read. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these, okay? So we don't need this anymore. I mean, it's working correctly. Just make our code much shorter. So we shortened that to almost like a lot of code. line of code here. Save that. And then we're going to go down to the get all. The get all here is, again, just to make sure that the list exists. If it doesn't exist, then we want to say, oh, there's no such list, right? So just, again, just to make sure. So we can say here, if the is list empty of the providers, if that is true, then we just want to return a status of 400. Actually, a 404. I should put 404 here, not 400. That means not found. And we send a message saying no provider. You can say, list is empty. Something like that. Okay. And so we get that to the user. I'm going to copy this. It'll be the same for the get one as well. So if there's no data, there's really nothing to send back, right? And then we'll do the same for the update. Well, update will be a little bit different, okay? Update will be a little bit different, but it will be the same. We'll check to see if it exists. If it doesn't, then well, you can't update. That means this is empty, cannot update, something like that. And if you go down the list to the delete, same thing. Go down here. If it's empty, there's nothing to delete, right? It's empty, cannot delete. And then one more down here for the all of them. Again, same thing. Cannot delete. Okay, so we take care of that issue. So now if I go back to the Postman, and so if I delete all of them first, so if I go and delete, and I'll delete all of them. Okay, so now the list should be empty. And if I go ahead and delete again, something's wrong here. Providers not found. Okay, so let's see. Well, this is the one I sent, right? Providers not, it's not defined. Okay, well, there's some errors in the code. Let's go back and fix it. So when I do a delete, this is providers here. Okay, provider. It should be providers, not provider. The list is empty. Let's fix that. And again, this is one of the reasons why you don't want to use it, because of mistakes like this. But it's an easy fix. Okay, so let's save that and do one more time. Now I'm going to go and delete them all. Okay, all is gone. All providers deleted. If I do it again, right, it's nothing. It's not empty, but it's deleted. So if I go and delete this individual ID here, right, nothing is there because it's not found.